New week in the call up, and we had a busy weekend of call ups and promotions. I was expecting the promotions, Jack. We're kind of at that time of the year where you'll start to see a lot of players start to, make that push towards the next level, especially as they're performing. But man, I was not expecting the call ups that we got. We're starting with Adael Amador, and then we got Drew Thorpe, Hurston Waldrep, Tyler Locklear, Carlos Rodriguez as well.
Yeah.
So kind of ranging all over the league. I love that we get to talk about some players that maybe we've been eager to see, and then some others that we were maybe not expecting at all to see at the big league level. So that's going to be fun. And then big time promotions, some really exciting prospects, and maybe guys that we actually just haven't talked about for whatever reason, just lost in the shuffle, but have been performing well. So that's why I love doing these promotion catch-ups too, because let's say a Grant McCray playing pretty well. Hayden Birdsong looks really good as well, but just not quite making the conversation so far. So now we get to give those guys a little bit of shine. And also a pretty exciting arm will be headed your way to Indy. So excited to get into that as well.
Sorry.
Yeah,
no, I saw him in the clubhouse on Saturday and I was like, wow, you're a massive human being. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But it was kind of interesting to see him. I was like, I remember seeing you in short season ball and like you were the long-term project and now you're just a huge man. So pretty interesting. But I'm excited to kind of get your in-depth thoughts on what went into this first call up that we hit on. But I certainly an interesting one. And like, I do really enjoy this time of year where, speaking at the AAA level, you have a lot of minor league opt-outs that happen. Like the opt-out date is either June 1, June 15. You'll see another wave of kind of a roster cleaning where the vets that have been performing will opt out in search of another opportunity. And that may result in time for, a AA prospect to come up and get some run. And this is also, I think, where you can really validate strong performance at a certain level. I think, you could look at, honestly, a month as a flash in the pan. You cannot look at 2 months as a flash in the pan. And we're seeing some really notable call-ups here.
Absolutely. And you want to start with the big league call-ups, and then we'll get into the promotions, or vice versa?
I want to start with the big league call-ups, and frankly, I want to start with the one that didn't make sense to me, and that's Adael Amador with the Rockies. But it should have made perfect sense to me because he got a hit in his first start. So, like, he got a hit in the big leagues. I'm wrong. It was the perfect time to get him up, wasn't it, Arm?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what the Rockies needed. I think that they're in a perfect spot here.
Well,
when Brendan Rodgers comes back, what do you platoon your switch hitter? What's the plan there?
Laying the groundwork. Ran through this on today's Just Baseball show. If you happen to listen to that too, but if you didn't, I really want to dive into this. Adael Amador is a top 50 prospect in Just Baseball's top 100. He checks in at number 47. He's the top Rockies prospect through May 24th. So the first 8 weeks of the season, 37 games, hit a .145 with a 176 slug. He had 2 extra base hits and 163 plate appearances. He had a 489 OPS. It was the 7th worst OPS in minor league baseball in that time frame. Since May 25th, he has the 6th best OPS in minor league baseball in that time frame. Now, sample is different. First 37 games, he had the 7th worst. Last 9 games, he has the 6th best. But he's hitting .359 with 6 homers and a 1268 OPS in AA. He got up. He got a knock in the big leagues. I love the platoon switch hit jab that you just threw because, it's not an indictment on Amador. He's a young guy that was in AA. But like I told you, this was a situational call-up. Brendan Rodgers hits the shelf, so you call up the top prospect in your organization. I firmly stand on the idea that the number 1, number 2, number 3 prospect in your organization should not be affected by what happens at the major league level. They should run their own race. They should not be ragdolled around. And it's great because he's making a lot more money now, right? Like he's getting big league service. It's awesome. But his progression was not finished. Like he's not a finished big league ready product. And we're seeing him push to the big leagues because of the big league situation. And I don't love that when it comes to a top 3 prospect in your organization, let alone your top prospect in the organization.
Especially when you have like Coco Montes in AAA right now, OPSing like, and I know it's Albuquerque, but he's OPSing 940. And what do you have the AAA team for, right? What do you even have Coco Montes for if he's not going to go up there and plug in for a couple weeks? Because we'll wait and see what happens when Brendan Rodgers comes back, but we'd imagine that it is a situational thing. And then, Amador, either they're going to have to figure out how to keep him in the lineup every single day, or he's just going to get optioned back. Either way, it's silly. If he's not playing every day, it doesn't make much sense. My concern from a developmental standpoint, and I think in the grand scheme, it won't matter. It's just more of a timeline thing and how things line up for him. And I think looking at the most ideal way for him to progress here, this is a guy that's just gotten out of the shadow of what was, I think, the worst stretch of his professional baseball career. And I'd venture to say probably baseball career, period. This is a guy that's hit at every single stop. And as an amateur people marveled at the way that he was able to make hitting look so easy. And baseball is just a hard sport. He's coming off of that broken hamate. And I think there was just some things that got thrown off. We talked about it about a week ago, actually, where I was telling you about how surprised I was to see him so in between timing wise, where you'd see a sword on a breaking ball and you're like, whoa. And then a fastball that looked like it just totally rushed him. And to me, that was, okay, I'm in my head a little bit. I'm overthinking, my at-bats, and also my timing is just jacked up. He's clearly got out to the other side, and that's really good. But what I don't love about it is, okay, he just fought through that worst stretch. And this dates back to the end of last year, right? Yeah. Like where he came back off the IL, struggled in AA. That's fine. He was coming off the IL, then went to the Winter League, struggled there. So it just, to me, it is a little bit larger of a sample of struggles. And then finally starts to see things settle in for him. And now you're going to throw him into the big league situation where even if he was clicking from day one of this season, getting up to the big leagues and as a switch hitter especially, and having pitchers attack you on a different level is just going to throw you into a bit of a rut unless you are one of the very few who can make that massive leap. But he's a guy that's barely put together a solid body of work in AA at this point. So that's the part that kind of frustrates me. Is I feel like it stifled his momentum. He's going to end up potentially getting sent back anyways. And it's like, okay, yeah, he plugged in a gap for a team that has no chance to compete this year and is playing for nothing. And all you did in that time was stifle his momentum, bring him up to the big leagues, and then send him back down. And look, I do understand that there's the value of, hey, he got up there and he got to see what it looks like and understands what he needs to do now. I think Amador understands what he needs to do anyways, because it's a rare bat to ball ability. And it was just him not really allowing himself to get into that position to consistently make contact because his timing was a little bit off and his path was a little bit off. I don't think it's really about approach and things like that. His approach has always been great. It's just going to be being ready for that caliber of stuff. And I just don't think he quite is just yet. So I thought it was really ambitious and I'm surprised by it. And if they do keep him up there for the rest of the year, then I think it's a lot better and it makes a lot more sense. And it's like, okay, we're not playing for anything. Let's just get him up here and let him finish out his development at the big league level because we love the makeup and we love the natural feel to hit. I can understand that one a little bit more, but if he gets optioned back down at any point this year, which I think is probably the expectation, I think it's an absolutely silly and just mindless move, to be honest.
This is also going to be a gauntlet of a week. So last night he goes 0 for 3 with 2 punch outs with Chris Paddock as the starter in Minnesota, right? So Paddock, he ran it up to 98. It was his hardest pitch of the season. Paddock looked as good as he has all year. And, frankly, like, no disrespect to my new favorite team, the Colorado Rockies, but, chances are you are going to look the best you look all year when you're playing the Colorado Rockies, especially away from Coors. He gets Louis Varland tonight. We'll see how that goes. Varland has been very underwhelming. But then you get Pablo Lopez on Wednesday. Off day. And then you get over the weekend Jones and Skeens. Like, come on now. He's going to get killed, I think. And, I hope he doesn't. I hope he slaps a bunch of singles around. And, this guy's hitting 300 at the end of the week. But I just don't see a world where that happens when he goes 0 for 3 with 2 punch outs against Chris Paddock in the Minnesota bullpen.
And just doesn't look like that comfortable. And it's when you look at the last 15, 20 games at the AA level, it was nice to see that power coming back because it was like, oh, I'm back on time. My moves are there. I have the feel for my body, and I'm seeing the ball earlier, so I'm going to let it eat a little bit more. Whereas before, even when he was picking up hits, it was like defensive swings. It felt like he was always working from behind, and now we're finally seeing him on the aggression, and that was like a really satisfying thing to see for a hitter like him, because he does need to slug a little bit. You do want to see him go gap to gap. And what is getting called up to the big leagues and hitting 8th or 9th going to do for you? It's going to put you back on the defense, and he's going to be back into that survival mode. And I would love to see him get back into that aggressor, which now he's going to have to find it again if he does not, have the success at the big league level. I hope he does, and I hope he proves us wrong. And we've been talking about Amador for a long time, and he's long been one of my favorite hitters in minor league baseball. And I've talked about the hit tool being, one of the safer in minor league baseball. The last point I'll make on this is a 21-year-old who also, and just turned 21, has to make this leap with 2 swings too. It's not just the right-handed swing and the left-handed swing. This was the last point I brought up on the Just Baseball show, was like, if he's struggling more from the right side, which, I know so far this year, the right side hasn't looked, as good. But, in the past, he's been pretty consistent from both sides. But generally speaking, the left side has always been a lot better. If he's struggling from the right side, they're going to bring in a lefty reliever to piece you up. They know right away. You mentioned, like, if they see that out on the board right there, they're going to bring in a lefty reliever, flip you around to the right side, and attack you. So if you're going to pinch hit for Amador in those spots, again, kind of silly that he's up there because he does need to get right-handed at bats at some point. And so that's the other side of it that's frustrating for me is, he might even be a little bit more ready with the left-handed swing, and maybe he performs that way. But then if they start flipping him around more, that's going to be a whole nother issue in itself too. So there's just so many variables here that I just don't understand for a team that has nothing really to play for. And the only time, Jack, that I agree with you on not really affecting your top prospects, I'd say the only time where you can really justify that is down the stretch of a major playoff race, and that player is your best option. And usually that's rare. That's very rare, because at that point, then they're pretty much close to big league ready.
No,
and that's
Caminero last year.
Yes, Caminero last year is a perfect example.
And Evan Carter last year. Like, I think those were the 2 right examples for that, where they help you get over the edge. And you saw what Evan Carter did in the postseason. You saw what Caminero did down the stretch, where that was kind of the finishing touches on a really strong regular season. I can also somewhat understand it when you are entirely out of it in September. And I'll go to the Rockies. 2022, September 22, they gave Tovar run. They said, Ezequiel Tovar, come up now. Let's do it. Could he have used a little bit more maturation in the minor leagues? Sure. Did he need it at that point? No. The games didn't mean anything for Colorado. This is their chance to see what they have in that 20-year-old shortstop at the time in Ezequiel Tovar, and now it's really paying off. This happening on June 9th, June 10th, is just kind of crazy to me.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tovar got a little taste of triple just before too.
Tovar did. It was like a week and a half in triple.
I mean, at least he had that.
Yeah, at least he had that. Yeah. Next guy that I want to talk about here is the White Sox. And speaking of games that don't mean much right now, I think you can already say that Sox games don't necessarily mean much. But Drew Thorpe gets the call. Thorpe is starting tonight. I'm really excited to watch this guy's major league debut, because I think he's going to translate, not just because he's a better talent than Nastrini and Cannon. I think he translates to the big league level better than most pitching prospects in Just Baseball's top 100. Drew Thorpe is another top 50 prospect in baseball, according to Just Baseball. I mean, we've lauded the changeup. You've lauded it for since the start of last year, really, when he came out like gangbusters in high A with New York. I mean, are you locked into White Sox baseball in Seattle on Tuesday night? I think I am.
You bet your ass I am. And the second they call up Iriarte and some of the other guys, I'll actually watch these games through the first 5 innings or so. And then I'll turn them off. But
it's Thorpe and Woo, by the way. Like, that's a fun one.
That's electric. And for the listeners of the pod, Thorpe has been the changeup that I gushed the most over. And then Woo's fastball and release characteristics, we talked about that a lot as he got closer to the big leagues, and then once he made that debut. So this is a fun matchup for us. I'll be excited. We'll definitely give that some airtime later this week to recap that. But I mean, this is an 80 changeup, and we don't I mean, I don't think we've thrown out another 80 changeup on the top 100 list, and it's because they don't come around very often. There's a reason why it's the top of the scale, and where you like to keep those close to our vest for the most part. But what I love about Thorpe is the changeup is so good, and we talked about the idea that, okay, can he avoid the Gavin Stone sequencing? And Stone looks awesome now too. He had to work through figuring out how to sequence, tweaking his arsenal a little bit so he's not so changeup dependent. But I think Thorpe's already a little bit further ahead in that regard. Whereas Stone, the slider wasn't there, so he starts experimenting with a cutter and just playing around. The fastball shape wasn't totally there, though. I think that the fastballs, you could say, are comparable because Stone throws harder. Thorpe's shape is better. I think ultimately it's pretty close, but Thorpe does get a little bit more in zone whiff at times, at least on the four seamer. I do think that that's the one thing we got to watch here is how does that four seamer at 91 to 93 play? It does have above average carry, but it is also from a high release. So it can get hit really, really hard if he leaves it over the middle or just, in a hittable spot. But what works in his favor is that I don't think there's a pitcher in professional baseball who makes their changeup. I mean, maybe you can make the case for a splitter but I almost want to separate that. There's not a pitcher in Major League Baseball, I think, that makes their changeup look more like their fastball. And that's what makes Drew Thorpe so good. And right now, opponents are hitting $156 against it this year. You go back to the entirety of his professional career, it goes even lower than that. We talked about how his in-zone whiff rate is some of the highest I've ever seen on a changeup, through the minor league levels. And beyond that, it works right on right. It of course, is going to be devastating to lefties. And the unique thing is, I'm very, I never really talk about the stuff plus aspect because I like to look at especially with prospects, like I want to look at it through my own lens and through the criteria that we apply to it. And sometimes I think stuff plus can be frustrating for me because I think it oversimplifies some things for fans. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how stuff plus feels about Drew Thorpe's changeup because it does not have a ton of vertical separation, meaning his changeup has more induced vertical break than most. So normally you'd want the opposite of that. You want that thing to drop off the table. But the difference is the longer it looks like a fastball and induced vertical break is going to make it look like a fastball, the more the hitter is going to be geared up for a fastball. And Thorpe, I think it's a God-given thing for him. The way that he throws the baseball, it looks like a fastball because of that induced vertical break. But at the very end, the last 15 feet, for whatever reason, it just dies. It slows down. And yes, he gets about 10 miles per hour separation, but it's beyond that. It just seems to slow down out of the air and drop and fade just enough. I think if it dropped and faded a little bit less, it would get hit. It's just enough to where it looks exactly like the fastball and then falls right below the barrel. And that's why you have some of the highest in-zone whiff rates. It's usually a chase pitch changeups. Guys do chase, but what makes his so ridiculous is the in-zone whiff beyond the chase.
So the term Bugs Bunny changeup is used way too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do people know the origin of the Bugs Bunny changeup? Like, I think you need to understand the origin to appreciate what a Bugs Bunny changeup is. And Drew Thorpe actually has a Bugs Bunny changeup.
Dude, it's so funny you say that because I finally was like, I'd read it in so many scouting reports that I was like, why is it Bugs Bunny changeup? I pulled up the clip. And it's where all the guys are swinging and missing in a row. That is Thorpe's to a T. I think I was doing the Thorpe write-up, and that's what sent me down that. So you nailed that. Continue, but like that is exactly what was going through my mind too.
Yeah. So like I see Bugs Bunny changeup used. Like I saw it with was it Scherzer? And I was like, no, it's not. Any circle change is not a Bugs Bunny changeup. No. Any Vulcan change is not a Bugs Bunny changeup. Any split change is not, because a split, a Vulcan, a circle, they all have arm side fade and vertical drop. A Bugs Bunny changeup, like actually just go watch cartoons for a minute because it is same path as the fastball, just slower. And like you get all those cartoons like waving through a pitch that is slower. And Thorpe, you laid it out perfectly. A Bugs Bunny changeup at its core is a pitch that looks a lot like a fastball, just slower. And I think a lot of that has to do with his release. And I like, for the YouTube crowd, here you go. He is a guy that kind of rips down the glove and will come from a very over-the-top slot, which is why you probably see the IVB up. Like we talk about a Luis Perales. I texted you. It looks like he's trying to get to 20 inches of vert on his fastball because it's so over the top and it's so righty. And Thorpe releasing a changeup from there, it's not going to like be able to drop like a hammer because you get like the pronation from the 3/4 side, and you're going to get some of that natural vertical drop because you're turning the ball over. If he turns the ball over, it's going sideways. It's not going down. So like his is such a unique profile. The closest thing to it, and Rogers I know gets a little bit more horizontal, but like rookie year Trevor Rogers was probably the closest thing you had to it.
Yeah, and it played unbelievably well, even though it didn't have the best shape in the world. I think that is another really good one. I think that delivery is an important point because the way that he's able to kind of keep that verticality there where it does still kind of roll off his fingers. Just I think if he pronated more, it would potentially look better in the models and look better, but it might not perform the same way. There was a couple changeups that I saw from the last start where it's right on right. It doesn't look like that good of a pitch. Like it just looks like a straight line pitch that slows down in midair, right? But like you have Matt Shaw waving over it. So a right on right changeup on the outer part of the plate, like belt high, and guys just waving over it. Again, it's just because it looks like a fastball way more than anything they've seen. And I go back to spring training. This is where I really wanted to watch Thorpe specifically because I had some conversations with folks I really enjoy picking their brains and talking about in the industry. And they had some reservations about the shape and stuff like that and how that would perform against higher level competition. And I saw Willie Adames take some miserable swings. I saw Rhys Hoskins take some miserable swings. And I was like, hey, I think this might just play. This might just be one of those pitches that, we got to apply a different, I think, just logic to. And I think his is just that. The last thing I want to mention, though, is he is, I think, a lot more well-rounded than just the changeup guy. And I am curious to see how the breaking balls play at the highest level because none of them are wipeout, but they are good pitches. And I think this is where it dates back to the Yankees pitch lab and not having him debut when they drafted him in 22. They've done that with a lot of their arms that they draft outside of the first round. And even I think any arms they'll do that with. And I really like what they do there because they seem to find what works best for them from a breaking ball perspective. I think Thorpe could have easily jumped into pro ball, gone fastball changeup really heavily and flown up the ranks and gotten up to the big leagues and not had that complete arsenal. I think the Yankees were proactive with him before moving him to get those breaking balls where they needed to be too. And he's got this slider that has been performing like really, really well since the beginning of his professional career and has been nasty for him as well so far this year. A 518 OPS against that for opponents. He'll mix in a curveball kind of as that like taste breaking strike stealing pitch. And then he's got a harder cutter, but I think that slider is probably his most trusted pitch outside of the outside of the changeup. And it's been pretty good for him. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And I think the fact that he has these three different breaking balls that he can kind of go to, I guess if you include the cutter into that, it does give him more wrinkles on top of the fact that the changeup can go right on right as well. So I think he's going to be able to mask the fastball enough and then not be too changeup dependent. But I think the most important thing is fastball location. Does the fastball get crushed? So far, it hasn't in professional baseball. So I think it can continue at the big league level as long as he hits the spots.
Trade Crochet this year. Do it because you're going to get a great prospect return for a guy with, I think, 4.5 years of control. And in a very short time, you're going to be running out a rotation of Thorpe, Schultz, Iriarte, Nastrini, Cannon. I mean, Paulette, if he gets right, Grant Taylor is not far behind. Eater, we'll see what he is when he's healthy. They've got a stable of pitching. Crochet can probably get you another good starting pitching prospect. Like, just lean into the young thing.
Yep. And I finally feel like they're doing it. We've been talking about on the JB show for a while, just like, come on, like, what are you going to do with Luis Robert? Do it. Oh, by the way, the home run he hit in Seattle. Woo!
He's amazing. And like, I hope that was the pitch for Seattle to go trade for him.
You mentioned Luis Perales. I just wanted to mention him real quick. Man, has he been unreal. Unfortunately, going down with the injury. Our guy Jeff Ponce from Baseball America was at the game and said he had looked dominant again right out of the gate, and then unfortunately he was holding his shoulder. It looked like his shoulder was hanging. So we'll see what the report is there injury wise. But the Red Sox prospect is just so talented. I'd seen his fastball jump 2 ticks this year, and again we had talked about him as like a breakout guy, but then we said, no, he's too good to be a breakout guy. I think it would have been reasonable considering how good he is this year or how good he has been to say that it was a soft breakout last year and it's a full-fledged breakout this year. His delivery, it's unique. It puts some pressure on the shoulder, no doubt. He works uphill and then kind of back downhill. And that, when you're fighting gravity, that can be a little bit difficult for the arm. And then also seeing a 2-tick jump in his fastball coming off of the year where he also had the largest body of work of his career, albeit it wasn't a ton, but it was 86 innings or something like that. It seemed like it might be a culmination of things. Hopefully that's just his body barking at him and saying, hey, you're throwing 2 miles an hour harder and we're on pace to blow the workload out of the water that we've ever had before. I just need to slow down. I'm hoping that's all it is and not an actual structural injury. So we'll wait to hear on that. But man, I mean, the Red Sox could really use Perales in terms of just the system and where he's headed. I like what they're building there, but it seemed like Perales was kind of leading the charge of the overhauled and improved development from the pitching side. It seemed like they'd helped him get to another degree of just stuff there. And hopefully he doesn't miss too much time.
Alex Spear of the Boston Globe said Luis Perales has been diagnosed with right elbow inflammation, not shoulder, elbow inflammation. It's tough. Like I just watched Gavin Williams work back in a rehab when he had elbow inflammation and he got an anti-inflammatory injection. Like hopefully the anti-inflammatory is enough, but that's probably a 2 to 3 week shutdown in and of itself.
It's a very, again, not a doctor, but I mean, we have enough of these instances where you start to just kind of anecdotally, you keep track of all of this, but inflammation could be anything from legitimately, it's just barking at him, as we just said, and hey, you're pushing the body a little bit too much. Let's take a little break.
Elbow inflammation, like
exactly
barking at him. Yeah,
but then also inflammation can be the precursor of something much worse. It's a very broad term, but I will say, in the grand scheme, that is a positive report to get, because if it was something for sure structural that he really felt, that wouldn't be the report at this point. So they may try it and it might not get better, but at least we know for now it's not the worst case scenario, which unfortunately we're always bracing for. And on that point, we don't need to go into this because I'm going to keep delaying us here. River Ryan, though, as he works back from some arm issues, looked phenomenal. Dodgers prospect, sitting 97, 23 pitches. But I mean, that's a guy that either will be a really good trade chip to go get a Luis Robert type, or he might be helping them down the stretch this year out of the bullpen or something like that. So River Ryan looks like he's on the mend as well.
I would ask his brother, but his brother apparently is like on his way up with the big club right now too. Like he's been optioned 3 times already. Like the max is 5 in a given year, and we're at 3 on June 11th, which is just crazy. But
who is that?
Ryder Ryan. He's bounced around a little bit. Yeah, younger or older brother of River.
So, I didn't know they were related. That's great.
Kind of interesting. But let's jump to Hurston Waldrep here. Waldrep made his major league debut on Sunday against DJ Hers, and just like everybody expected, Hers was the better one on Sunday. Hurston Waldrep, 3 2/3, 7 hits, 7 earned, 4 walks, 1 punch out, and a 3-run homer allowed to Keibert Ruiz. Faced the minimum through 3 1/3. And then the wheels fell off, and he lost confidence in and around the strike zone. Ruiz's homer was splattered in there, but a couple of singles and a bunch of walks, man. Like you can't get away with that. And I brought this point up to you, like, I thought the walk thing, it's not going to be all but gone because you walk guys like that for long enough, like those habits are going to creep back in. But his last 5 starts in the minor leagues, his last 4 in Mississippi, and his start in Gwinnett, he looked so ridiculously confident within the strike zone. And that was just not what we saw at all when the wheels started to divert from the tracks in the 4th inning on Sunday in DC.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it felt like he had that splitter going in the beginning, had hitters uncomfortable, and then as hitters adjusted the second time around, it seemed like he just couldn't quite adjust back. And that was always the concern. Fastball is hard. It's 96 to 98, but it's hittable. It doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't have great characteristics to it. So then there's pressure to see that slider be a better pitch. And it has been in the minor leagues, but it wasn't there for him in his debut. He threw, I think, only 5 of the 13 for a strike. So as the slider's not there for him, as hitters start to pull up the zone and leave some of those splitters down or fastballs down, just anything that was starting, I think below the belt they were leaving. I think he started to trust his stuff a little bit less, and it started to become a little bit more difficult for him to get outs. And he started to lean onto that splitter even more and elevate it even more. And I think that's why we saw him throw as many splitters as fastballs. So I think we saw the good and the bad. And the good is that this is a guy that can absolutely set down big league hitters when he's doing things right. And when he's executing, he can mow right through 1, 2, 3 inning and go into the next one. But we can also see that hitters with a good approach and that have an understanding of how he's going to go at them can kind of throw him out of his rhythm. And he doesn't really have a plan B at this point. There's not another way for him to go get hitters if the slider's not there. The fastball is good, but not good enough in a starter role to go fastball splitter and turn over a lineup twice or even really more than once. So I think that's what we saw. I still think that he is a guy that can help them right now. And even as a starter, I think the slider will be there more in other starts. It has been for a lot of this year. And you mentioned the command. To me, this didn't look like Waldrep can't throw strikes. To me, this looks more like the Waldrep that didn't trust his stuff. And we haven't seen the latter. We've seen the former plenty, but we haven't seen the latter. And I think it was one of the first times that Waldrep maybe hasn't trusted his stuff. Welcome to the big leagues.
Welcome to the big leagues indeed. If I were in Snit's shoes, I think they should view him as a starting pitcher that will give them 4, 5 on the best day. And it can turn into him versus Vines. Who would you rather have go 4 innings at the front of a designed quote unquote bullpen game? Right. And Schwellenbach is the type that can go 5 or 6, I think at this point, but you want to protect a guy like Waldrep and make sure you get away from those 4th innings. Notice where the issues came about. If he got you through 3 and then he allowed 2 quick base runners in the 4th, that should be the yank. And you should view this as a protected start, not a guy that's going to fight through the adversity at the big league level, because frankly, you didn't give him the opportunity to work through adversity in the minor leagues. He was a rocket ship last year. It was 6, 7 weeks this year. That's it. There's no chance to fight through adversity at that point.
No, and I agree with that. I will say that given it's June 11th, I know that they're not playing at the best of their ability, and they're going to need to start playing better to keep pace with the Phillies, which may become an afterthought at that point, and just keep pace with the wild card. I want to give Waldrep, I think, and they will, like a chance to try to go 5+ a couple more times at least, see how it goes. But to your point, I'm with you. He probably, at least this year, best serves them in that short spurt opener, but he could be a longer form opener of a 3-inning guy, or a guy that piggybacks. That could be a really good piggyback, or it could be that high leverage reliever down the stretch. What I think is nice is they can bring him up now on June 11th and see how he performs in the starter role, see how the stuff looks, and then kind of create that role for him the rest of the year from there. And that doesn't alter the perception on him long-term. I still think long-term you're looking at a starter, but then through the offseason can continue to find that slider, maybe add a curveball that can be a taste breaker and be more, multi-dimensional as that comes. But I will say Waldrep has gotten himself to, I think, a much better place than we even saw at the end of last year, which was a guy that does have a chance to turn lineups over when he's on, because the command is so much better and the slider has looked much better. But I think we see how quickly the wheels can fall off for a guy like him and how quickly he can become one-dimensional. But that one-dimensional approach with the stuff ticking up in 1 to 2 inning spurts, that can still play and be important for them. I think he pretty much has until AJ Smith-Shawver is healthy, I think, to prove that he can stick in the rotation, or if Schwellenbach really hits a wall. But I trust Schwellenbach to turn lineups over a little bit more right now. So we had him ranked a little bit ahead. But ultimately, I think this is a really fun situation pitching wise. I know it's not what Braves fans envision, but for me, selfishly, and I know for you, I want to see Schwellenbach and Waldrep throw. And I think no matter what, they're going to be helping the Braves one way or another in the big leagues down the stretch this year.
And I hope when AJ rejoins them, we get to see all 3 in some capacity with the Atlanta Braves at the major league level. 2 more big league call-ups that we got to talk about on the call-up before we get to a couple of promotions within the minor leagues. Tyler Locklear, the Seattle Mariners, already has a double to right center at 100 in Kansas City on Sunday. But Locklear is a guy that in AA, he was hitting about 290 with an OBP just above 400 and was slugging right around 500. And then it gets to AAA, smaller sample, but same thing. 300-ish, 400-ish, 500-ish. you made the point. This guy hits the living crap out of the ball. He's a big, strong man. He does not look 23 years old like he is right now. He looks like a 29-year-old that, has spent a bunch of time in a professional weight room. He's a thick guy that is the perfect stopgap while Ty France is out.
Oh, I think this is an example of, and then we were talking top prospects, but this is an example of a prospect that, excuse me, probably not fully ready, but has made such impressive improvements in the box, quieting those moves down, especially just that big barrel tip and the bat wag that he had with his hands out in front of him, like quieting that down, getting himself in a position to make more consistent contact, and seeing that more consistent contact this year. 25% strikeout rate at the upper levels, hitting 291. That's also including these 2 big league games. But just seeing that, I think is encouraging enough to throw him up there and give him this opportunity. And he would have just continued to tear through AAA competition. And Ty France had been swinging it better, and that's what makes the injury frustrating. But you mentioned a guy that can fill in right now, at the very least can crush lefties. And I do wonder that if he performs in some way, through this stretch before France comes back, if they find a role for him as a platoon guy, as some of these other guys are continuously banged up, I think he probably ends up getting an option because they have so many other pieces, and Polanco is going to come back off the IL, and other guys will be coming back. But this is a perfect example of a guy that I think would have just dismantled upper level pitching because they don't quite have the caliber of stuff to expose the swing and miss. It's going to get exposed a little bit at the big league level. I'm not saying he won't get his, but I think this is one of those examples where it's different from Amador, where a few weeks up there will be valuable for him because now he can go back to AAA in the PCL. And even when he's mashing, he's going to know what he actually needs to be working on. Like, he could have a 2-for-4 day in Albuquerque, but he didn't hit those sliders that were breaking away from him. And he knows that that's what he needs to be doing, not going 2-for-4 in Albuquerque every day. So I think that aspect of it does help. And those things will help Amador too. But I think Amador needed a lot more that he still needed to work through. Whereas Locklear, again, if he was in double and triple, he'd be mashing nonstop. So I think this is a good learning experience. But beyond that, this is a guy that can help them right now and can catch fire because of how hard he hits the ball. It's a 90th percentile of 107. The chase rates have been a little bit high, but still have gotten better. His swing decisions have gotten better, and the contact rates have been good enough, and he elevates consistently. At the very least, he's going to be punishing lefties for them while Ty France is out.
The other thing that I think is really important that separates an Amador and a Locklear situation, again, Locklear is not a top 100 prospect in baseball. He's not a top 7 prospect in the Mariners organization. He's the number 8 prospect for the Mariners when we did this about 6 weeks ago. Amador is a top 3 prospect in the Rockies organization. He is their top prospect. You do not alter the course of a top 3 prospect. You can alter the course of a number 8 prospect.
Yep.
And when you run into issues like this is a fun, again, I'll use the word stopgap. Like, this is a fun version of a, hey, let's fill the space that our franchise leader in hit by pitches over the course of a career left. Like, I think it's, I don't think it's funny. I think it sucks, but I think it's funny that, like, as soon as he set the franchise record for most hit by pitches, did you see the graphic that the Mariners put out?
I loved it. I love
so
that.
Funny. And, like, as soon as that happens, he hits the IL and Locklear gets the call.
And guess what Locklear did in game 2 of his big league career?
You get hit by a pitch?
Yep.
Dude.
He's a hit in each of his 2 games, but he also has a hit by pitch. So doing his part to keep the legacy alive.
Osmosis. Last big league call-up that we got to talk about. Purely situational. Carlos F. Rodriguez, the 22-year-old from Nicaragua, one of the very few Nicaraguan players to get up to the major leagues. And I know they were kind of like the darling of the WBC, and it was fun to watch him. And they had that reliever sign a minor league deal with the Tigers after the fact. But
you got to check in on that guy, by the way.
I know, but Carlos F. Rodriguez was in that rotation for Nicaragua in the World Baseball Classic. He had a year in 2022, 107 innings of 301. He had a year last year, a better year, almost 130 innings in the minor league season between Biloxi and Nashville, 128 and a third. He had a 2.88 ERA, 11 Ks per 9, 4 walks per 9. This year, he was not having a year. 62 and 2/3 innings across 11 starts, an ERA over 5 at 5.17. The changeup, again, like you want to talk about changeup pitchers, he's only up there because Hall and Gasser are hurt. And, like they needed pitching. He was the next answer. You see, Gasser is going to get a third opinion on his arm.
A third?
Third. So he went to Team Doc. Second opinion was Neil Elatrosh. Third opinion, he's going to Keith Meister.
Wow.
It's crazy. So, like, listen, if you get a third opinion, it's scary, I think.
Yeah, it's never good. I mean, that's
never good. But, I mean, Carlos Rodriguez is a big leaguer. How's it going to go? I don't know.
I mean, I will say he looks good. You set the stage, and the one thing that we didn't totally see was like, okay, how does it look consistently at the big league level as hitters are more disciplined or at the AAA level, I should say,
level, yeah.
where hitters are more disciplined and you have former big leaguers that are going to lay off that changeup that had been the pitch that really was his bread and butter at the lower levels. I think we've seen him just look a lot more multifaceted this year and have a much more complete arsenal where he's going to come at you with a cutter or manipulate that to a bigger slider. He also has the four-seamer that's a little bit harder this year, which is interesting because I think shape-wise it had left a bit to be desired and it was in the low 90s. Now it's a tick higher, and he actually is slightly below average release-wise and now he's generating slightly above average carry. So now that fastball is probably playing at about an average level, a big league average level, which is more than fine when you've got a really good changeup, a cutter, a slider, a sinker that will also mix in there to get ground balls, and then that taste breaking kind of get me over 75-mile-an-hour curveball. Ceiling's capped. Yeah, I think it's one of those classic floor ceiling back end guys, but those are really valuable players. Especially, I think you're seeing why these prospects are so valuable with a team like the Brewers right now that are so pitching thin as you set the stage to, and are in first place. Rodriguez can come in there, slot in, be a mid-fours guy, and help keep you afloat. And I think that's exactly what he can do. He might give you flashes of more than that. My only concern with him, not only, but my main concern with him is the long ball. And as he's generating a little bit more carry, he's starting to play a little bit more up in the zone. He likes that cutter elevated as well. That's great. You're going to have to accept that guys are going to clip you every once in a while, but can you do that with nobody on base? Can you do that without giving away the free passes? The walk rate's at 11%. He has historically had some pretty good command. I think I might attribute that to the ABS a little bit too. And if we see that walk rate tick closer to 7%, 8%, then I think he's okay. But if that walk rate's 10, 11% at the big league level, then I think we may see him start to have those blow up innings because the long ball can be where he gets burned. And I think where he is going to be successful is pitchability, kitchen sink, and, limit the damage when it comes. I still do think that this is a guy that can help the Brewers right now and slot into the back of that rotation and give them, 5 innings every fifth day. It might be 5 innings, 3 runs some days. It might be 6 innings, 4 runs some days. It might be 6 innings, 1 run when he's on. I do think he has that in him. But at the very least, he's given them, I think, 5, 6 innings, and they need that really badly right now.
Yes, they do. All right, we'll go rapid fire through some notable promotions here as we tie a bow on this show. I've got 2 Phillies, 2 Giants, a Pirate, and a Cardinal real quick. Let's start with the Cardinal. College bat, Travis Honeyman, the Boston College kid that was, 3rd round pick of St. Louis last year? He's off the complex. He goes to low A. I don't really know the context. I don't even know if you really know the context, but he was hitting really well across like a 7 or 8 game sample, like in the complex. Why is he just now getting to an affiliate?
Yeah, he had an undisclosed injury, and I do know that injury concerns were a little bit of the reason why Honeyman was. I think that was kind of one of the negatives of him as a draft prospect. Still 90th overall pick out of Boston College, but I think it was another one of those just nagging injuries, undisclosed as it always is with the minor leaguers. I get it, so we don't totally know, but he did go play a handful of games at the complex. Looked really good there, as you'd expect from a college bat out there, but he did what you would want to see, which was go 10 for 21 in that stretch with 5 walks and 3 Ks. So clearly he's healthy and ready to go. I think there's some pull dependency there, and I think there's some aspects of he can be out and around the baseball. There's a lot of moving parts, but he's a really good athlete. He's a fun player, and I know Pete Flaherty acknowledges that of Baseball America, one of our favorite guys to talk draft, acknowledged when I remember asking him about Honeyman, acknowledged the volatility there and kind of the where it could go, but also said in the 3rd round, it's a really intriguing prospect. I agree, and I'm excited to see what he does now in full season ball.
Got you. Two Phillies that I want to talk about, Aidan Miller and George Klassen. They go from Clearwater to Jersey Shore together. Let's start with Aidan Miller, who is inside the top 100, just turned 20. Happy belated birthday, Aidan Miller. Turned 20 years old on Sunday. 39 games in low A. Aidan Miller slashed 275, 401, 483. 16 doubles in 39 games, 5 homers, drove in 26, 10 for 11 in the stolen base department with an 884 OPS. This is one of the quick risers in the top 100, it seems.
Oh yeah, and I think we're lower than some, and I couldn't give you a reason why. Like I like everything I've seen so far, but I think it's more of a testament to the fact that Baseball America and some other really reputable folks out there are very excited about what he's doing, and I get it, I am too. But I think we saw him pushed really, really high on some lists. I think Baseball America might have had him inside the top 50, maybe even higher than that. So I get it. He's hitting the living crap out of the ball, and he's really talented. What is interesting to watch here, though, is he should have been promoted to high A regardless. Should have been up there maybe a week or two even earlier. He is going up there through amidst a little bit of a tough stretch relative to what we've seen from him. He's still walking, and he's still slugging when he does hit the ball. But over his last 10 games, he's hitting a $167. Over his last 15 games, hitting a $185. So that's the interesting thing is when you go over those cumulative numbers, they were even prettier than that before this 2 week or week and a half stretch here or lull. I wouldn't put a ton of stock into it. It's the Florida State League can get exhausting, and you could go on a couple tough stretches where you're playing, at Bradenton, and then you're playing somewhere else like St. Lucie where the ball just doesn't really fly, and all of a sudden, those struggles can mount on you a little bit. What I love is he's always, walking and offsetting that. And when he does hit the ball, he's still slugging. I'm not worried about it, but there may be a little bit of an acclimation process to high A, especially since he is coming out of a slump at the end as he's getting promoted. But I'm excited to see him now at high A, and he's earned it. And we'll get to obviously George Klassen in a minute.
BA's got Philly fever. Painter at 20, Aidan Miller at 21. And then you've got Justin Crawford at 48, Starling Caba at 55. 4 top 55 prospects for the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah.
That has to get Dave Dombrowski fired up for the deadline.
Oh yeah. 21. Wow. So they're and that's, they're talking to the teams and stuff. So scouts must be gushing. So that's exciting. But
George Klassen, 9 starts with low A Clearwater, 38 innings, a 0.71 ERA for Klassen. So 38 innings, 3 earned runs, 1 home run allowed, and 144 batters faced. Punched out 57 and walked 12. So that's 13.5 Ks per 9 and fewer than 3 walks per 9 for Klassen. This is an older guy, 22-year-old, 6th-round pick out of University of Minnesota last year. But man, who would have seen this coming? Klassen last year, 56 2/3 with Minnesota. ERA was 5.7. He walked 47 in 56 2/3. He's a different arm. What did they do to him?
Fastball ticked up. He's also, the stuff is just different. He's got the curveball that is a banger. He's got a slider as well that's been devastating. And he's got 2 variations where he's got the 4-seamer that has that run and ride, and then he's got like a true sinker that gets ground balls. That's what I love about him too, is you've got so far, and I know he's just overpowering lower level hitters, but you got a 40% K rate and you got a 60% ground ball rate. So even if those numbers drop way down, there's not a ton of pressure on him to have to strike everybody out. I do have some concern about the effort in that delivery, and I do think that such a high effort delivery one can obviously be difficult for a starter's workload, and especially for a guy that's throwing 97.5, averaging the fastball there. It looks like a max effort delivery, but so far he's been throwing strikes. I do wonder if the secondary command is going to be consistent as he gets stretched out more and with that high effort delivery, but he is more than ready for high A. He's a guy that I think should be in double A sooner rather than later. And I think that's where we can really see what it all looks like, because the stuff is double A ready and he's already 22, but I'm glad he's off of the low A ranks. Him and Quinn Matthews, it was just wasting bullets down there at that point. They're throwing bullpens basically.
Yeah, fast track it. Go Kirkering mode on George Klassen. Kirkering mode. That sounds like something that Good Friday night. Oh, my buddies went Kirkering mode. 2 Giants, Hayden, Birdsong, Grant McCray. They go from AA Richmond to AAA Sacramento. We'll start with Hayden Birdsong here. And this guy was like sneaky putting together one of the better starts in AA for starting pitchers. 22-year-old, 6th-round pick in 22 out of Eastern Illinois. Birdsong, 11 starts with Richmond, had a 2.05 ERA, 48 in the third innings, 61 punch-outs, 20 walks. He was on, man. And last year, like this guy between low A, high A, and double A, really kind of like an equal third split. The majority of his time was spent in San Jose last year, but in 100 innings as a 21-year-old, he had a 3.3 ERA and was punching out 13.5 per nine. He might just be like really good. And I think we're finding this, and he's experiencing success at every single level he's been at.
Yeah, I think really he is good. The only thing that's missing here is secondary command. And it's not totally missing this year. And now we're seeing what happens when it's there. The curveball is gross, but it has so much depth to it that he has struggled to locate it consistently. And so it has become a little bit of an auto take. When guys do swing, they don't hit it. Like they swing right over that thing. I'm begging this man to throw his changeup more, though. This goes back to last year. Changeup has been disgusting, but he only throws it about 12% of the time. 77% strike rate on that changeup. And he's also, 40% chase rate. Like it's off the charts on a lot of these things. Maybe part of that's because of how he uses it, but I still think you can get away with a little bit more usage because right now it's 53% fastball usage, 15% curveball, 13 slider, 12 changeup, 7 cutter. I think he could use that changeup a little bit more because right now the curveball strike rate's below 50%, but the slider has been there for him from a strike perspective, but it's not nearly the swing and miss pitch. So I do think that there's a sequencing aspect to this that he still needs to figure out. But what we're seeing is the stuff is so good that he's been able to perform at the AA level. Now you get to an environment where it's even more pressure to execute your pitches. And I think the ERA may inflate. Don't care too much about that as long as, we're seeing him execute with the secondary stuff and get swings and misses. But the command has just been a little bit spotty so far. And I think that's the last thing. But that over the top, big, tall guy delivery and the curveball down from there is pretty nasty. So it's just going to be a matter of the command.
McCray is an interesting one here because 50 games, he's technically putting up his worst year as a pro to this point. Graham McCray has a 730 OPS. He's hitting in the low 200s. Where are the bags? This guy stole 52 last year. He's 6 for 6 in 50 games so far this year. But curious what McCray is. I loved the comp that you gave to Grant McCray when we were doing the Giants top prospects this offseason. You said, this is pretty much a lower level Trent Grisham. And I love that. He's going to defend. Now he gets to show it off in the PCL where you have huge ballparks because the ball's going to fly a little bit. I think we're going to see that defense on full display. But where have the shortcomings been for Grant McCray offensively?
It's kind of more of the same, the swing and miss. What I do like is we're seeing him hit the ball as hard as ever. And I think we're seeing him elevate. And that's something that's kind of been there for him. But just the swing and miss has been the problem. I like a guy like Grant McCray. I'm pretty much just going to weed out lefties and say, okay, he should almost never face those guys. And you look at just facing righties. What I was hoping to see that strikeout rate drop when you sort by just righties. It doesn't. So it's just purely swing and miss. That's really what it's going to come down to. And can he make enough contact? He's right on the fringe of being able to make enough contact to be a big leaguer. And so we'll see how that looks in AAA. I will say that the underlying stuff is good enough to be a fourth outfielder. And I think that's what you can at least lean on is a fourth outfielder with the crazy pop. You love to talk about the Sam Hilliards and those types. You could throw him in the same bucket as those players, especially with the way that he can go get it in center field though. But if he can make some adjustments to just get that hit tool slightly better, just to make a little bit more contact, I think you could see a guy that could be an exciting platoon piece. But right now, there's just too much in zone whiff. But I mean, if the bags come along as well, I just don't know if he's been getting on base enough. I don't know what it is. Why he hasn't been saying maybe he's not 100% healthy. There's so much that goes into that. But this is somebody that I do think could see the numbers jump in AAA, and then we need to keep looking at the underlying contact rates is the most important thing.
Yeah. Last guy that I want to talk about is a Pittsburgh Pirate who just hopped into Indy's clubhouse, Braxton Ashcraft, 24-year-old guy, second round pick out of high school in 2018. He is still a top 6, top 7 prospect in the organization, depending on how you look at it. But Ashcraft is a guy that has been unhealthy for so long. And it's been tough because it was the COVID year, and then it was a non-throwing shoulder separation, and then it was Tommy John. Like, it's been a very weird stretch for Ashcraft, but he's healthy now. And he made 10 starts in Altoona, 1 appearance out of the bullpen. He had a 3.69 ERA in AA, 53 2/3, 63 punch-outs, 8 walks. And in May, this guy was unreal. 14 1/3 innings in April, had an ERA at 6.9. In May, 32 1/3, a 1.95 ERA across 6 starts. And in 32 1/3, punched out 39, walked 6. So he had arguably the best May that we've seen from a minor league pitcher. And I know Christian Crespo, again, has been doing great work. It made him the minor league pitcher of the month in May. June, 1 start, punched out 12, didn't walk anyone, got hit a little bit, though. It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to the ABS. And this guy is about 24 and a half on the older side of 24. Yeah, 24 and 250 days. So, this is a guy that, like, if he's healthy, might as well give him a shot, especially if they're running out bullpen days right now with Priester on the shelf.
No doubt. And this is a big leaguer, point blank. Yeah. How, what, where, what it looks like, we'll find out. And unfortunately, with injuries, it's just so many injuries to him. It's been hard to get a clear-cut view on him. But from what we've seen in the body of work this year, Jack, he kind of reminds me of prospect-wise. Another guy who recently debuted.
Give me the league. Division.
NL West.
Mason Black?
No. Mazer. Because I'll make my case. Fastball's mid-90s, characteristics, but it's mid-90s, and he spots it. Then secondaries, I think both are. The slider is probably his best pitch. It's above average when you look at the characteristics, but it plays as a plus pitch because he commands the living crap out of it. 73% strike rate. But gets enough whiff, gets enough chase, and then mixes in a curveball that he has a phenomenal feel for as well. It's a 70% strike rate across his entire arsenal, across those 3 pitches. But what I love is I think everything plays up because of how well he commands it. The difference is Mazer is younger, not as much injury history. As a 4th pitch that he'll mix in there is a little bit more multifaceted. But I think there's some similarities there to the way that maybe nothing jumps off the page. The breaking balls are good, but the way that they pitch, sequence, command, I think is what really stands out. This is a guy that struck out 29% of batters this year, and he's walked less than 4%. That's really impressive stuff, and that's going to make you a big leaguer when you can also throw in the mid-90s. Forget the TrackMan data at that point. If you mid-90s, throw strikes, 2 above average breaking balls that you locate, you got a job in the big leagues for a long time as long as you're healthy.
Love it. That's what we got.
We have Griffin Conine coming on tomorrow's show. Look out for that because, of course, we were planning to talk to him about just baseball stuff because normally when we have a prospect on, we want to talk about that prospect and talk about his career. And of course, we're going to do that with Griffin, but normally we don't have enough time to get into some of the other things and get a player's perspective on some of those other aspects. And it's exactly what we're going to be able to do with Griffin, where we can get into bat tracking data. We're going to talk about the ABS, but we're also going to now talk about the fact that he is one of the hottest hitters in the minor leagues, period, right now. Absolutely ripping through baseballs, 4 straight games with a homer as we're recording this before he plays on Tuesday, and as that OPS up over 900. So obviously very excited about him performance-wise, but also very excited to talk to him as one of the smarter baseball minds I know, and a guy that's taught me plenty about the game, just being able to talk about his experiences and things like that. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy that episode, so keep an eye out for that in the coming days as well. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you tomorrow.